Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Myra Levy, as you can see next to my picture, and I'm a volunteer with Swing Left San Francisco. My fellow introvert, Elizabeth Chur, and I are honored to have people here from all over the country. Once again, welcome. If you haven't already done so, we invite you to put your city and state in the chat where you're joining from today. Before we launch into the training, I want to invite everyone to just take a breath and acknowledge not only what it took to get here today, but how much is going on in our country and the world right now. What we've been living through is a lot. I have a banner here in my house that says, "This shit is not normal." And it's been hanging up for so long that it's gathering dust. Friends, it's a hard time to be an introvert. These past 5 or 6 years have been full of crisis upon crisis. Threats to our democracy, attacks on reproductive justice, war, climate change, a global pandemic. And it turns out that one of the most effective things we can do as individuals is talk with strangers. It is a hard time to be an introvert. But we're here today to explore the important contributions we introverts have to offer the world in these times. And now Elizabeth will give us a quick overview of today's agenda.
Thanks, Myra. As I mentioned before, we're so honored to have people from all over the country and actually internationally today joining us. So go Team Introvert and friends. Just a few quick housekeeping items. This is not a phone bank. Today, we are having a training for people who are interested in phone banking and canvassing, or at least willing to learn more. Because this is such a large group, please keep yourself muted most of the time. We will give you a chance to talk in smaller groups a couple times during the workshop, and there will be time to ask questions at the end. After the training, we'll send you the slide deck, some bonus tips, and information about upcoming volunteer opportunities. We are recording today's training, and we'll send you the edited version once it's available in a few weeks. We have to do some editing. So if for some reason you did not register for this training in advance, please just private message me your email address so I can get you all that information after the workshop. We know that 2 hours is a really long time to be on Zoom, and we really appreciate you hanging with us. We're going to go straight through the program today without a formal break, but if you need to take a quick stretch break or bathroom break, please feel free. Again, if you haven't had a chance to print out the handout that we sent you in advance, now would be a fantastic time to do that. We will be referring to it several times during the training, and you'll need this for the practice sessions. So if we were in person, we'd be just handing this out to you, the paper version. So we ask you to bear with us for a few moments so we can make sure that everybody gets a copy of material. So if you didn't get the handout already, we are dropping a PDF into the chat. We encourage you to download and print the document if you can. If you don't have a printer, no problem. We just suggest that you download the file and have it available for the practice sessions. If you are joining us on an iPad or a phone, you may not see the PDF in the chat. So we will be dropping a link to that same document in a Google Doc format into the chat, and hopefully you will be able to access that version. Just to clarify, these are all different ways to access the same document. And as a very last resort, if you are having trouble downloading the file, please put your email address into the chat, and one of our team members can send you the handout via email in the next few minutes. Don't worry, we're not going to be referring to the handout for a little while, so have a few minutes to take care of all those logistics. Myra?
Okay, now a quick overview of today's training. In a few minutes, we'll give you a chance to introduce yourselves to each other in small groups, the kind of thing we used to consider normal when we were together in person. And then we'll talk about why phone banking and canvassing are so important and so effective. We'll share some of our best tips for communicating effectively with voters. And after that, Elizabeth and I will demonstrate a few interactions and give you a chance to practice, and then we'll wrap up. We'll have an optional question and answer period at the end. So if you have questions during the training, please make a note of them and save them for the end. As Elizabeth mentioned earlier, today's training is not a phone bank, and we're not going to go into the mechanics of phone banking or canvassing. That's partly because those details vary from one campaign to another and from one week to another, And you'll get that kind of information at the start of an actual phone bank or canvas when you sign up to do it. So today, we're going to focus instead on what to do when you get a chance to talk with a voter on the phone or in person. We'll be talking mostly about phone banking today, but the basic tools and principles of how to engage with voters apply to canvassing as well, even if we don't say that every time. Now, we have 3 goals for today's workshop. 1, we hope you'll come away with some concrete new skills, and you'll get a chance to practice those later in small groups. 2, we hope you'll feel more confident, inspired, and perhaps even excited to phone bank or canvass. And most importantly, we hope you'll sign up to phone bank or canvass in the next week. Back to Elizabeth.
So speaking of phone banking and canvassing, I'd like to just take a quick poll. Could you raise your hand if you've ever phone banked before? Wow, a lot of folks. Okay, thank you. Put your hands down, please. And how about raise your hand if you've ever canvassed, knocked on doors in person? All right. Wow. My goodness. Thank you. And then if there's anybody who hasn't done much phone banking or canvassing yet, but you're willing to give it a try, you want to raise your hand? Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. We're thrilled to have all of you here. So during this training, we're going to share a lot of reasons about why phone banking and canvassing are so important and so effective. But first, perhaps some of you are not thrilled about the idea of talking politics with strangers. So we invite you to take a moment to list all the reasons not to phone bank or canvass. You can just go ahead and put that in the chat. Just let loose. Bring it on. Wow. Someone might yell at me, says Cheryl. Diane says, embarrassing. Charlie, people could be mean. Jill, I hate getting unsolicited calls. Ricky, fear I won't know how to answer people's questions. Dara, more fun to watch Brooklyn 99 with my daughter. Meg, if I don't like getting phone calls, what right do I have that to inflict that on others? Noelle, what do you say? Denise, I'm not very effective when I've tried. Nancy, I don't answer my phone to strangers. People don't want to talk about politics with strangers. Roger, argumentative. And what if I freeze? Beatrice, I'm usually not very nice when people call me about candidates. Dara, it feels intrusive. Lee, I have cochlear implants, so sometimes clarity of speech is an issue. I'm willing to be a driver for others who are doing the canvassing. Allison, I found it dispiriting when people hung up or were rude. Paul, it's emotionally draining, especially after a long week or day. Linda, last time I canvassed, only 2 people answered the door out of 4 doors knocked. Sad face. Yes. Thank you, everybody. This is a great list. All of the above, says Britta. This is such a great list. Thank you so much for sharing this. These are normal fears, reservations, and when we've done this training in the past, I can tell you these reasons come up every time from groups. So I'm really glad that you've shared that with us, and we hope to address some of these in this training. Myra?
Thanks. Okay, so next, Elizabeth and I are going to tell you a little about ourselves and how we got here. I've always been an activist, but I was never much involved in electoral politics. Canvassing and phone banking were things I thought I would never do. But then the 2016 election happened and it lit a fire under me. And I learned that having actual conversations with voters and potential voters is the most effective way to invite them to participate in elections. So in 2017 and 2018, I knocked on doors. For those of us who live in the Bay Area, that meant driving quite a distance to our nearest swing district. But I found that canvassing with a friend was something I could do. And it seemed as if the people I got to speak with were eager to talk about what they saw going on in the country. It felt like a public service to listen and be present. And those are things I know how to do. Since the beginning of COVID, I have not been out canvassing. Which leaves phone calls. Now, I'll be honest. Even now, I am a reluctant phone banker. Introvert. Here's what happens when I do overcome my reluctance and I sign up to phone bank. I wake up that morning and my first thought is, shit, this is my day to phone bank. And then as the time gets closer, I think, is it too late to back out? And then I log into the Zoom call for the phone bank and I see all the friendly faces and I realize I'm one of those friendly faces. So there's a training and the training ends and then I make some calls. No matter how much I prepare, this is what phone banking looks like for me. Okay. And as the phone is ringing, I am thinking, I hope they don't answer. I hope they don't answer. I hope they don't answer with every call. So what I've learned is two things. Prepare, but not too much. I have to make that day's script into something that sounds like me, not a sales pitch, but an offer. And two, phone banking is a skill or a set of skills, really. It takes practice and trial and error. It's important to do it well, and there's also a learning curve. To be honest, sometimes it is hard. Not many people answer the phone, as you've mentioned already, and when they do, I may not feel confident. Sometimes I feel like I've failed, but sometimes I have one or two good conversations, and that reminds me how important this work is. Thanks to a lot of grassroots organizations, voter contact campaigns are focused on very close races, seats that could flip red or blue. And as you know, these elections are won or lost on the margins, often by very few votes. For example, in 2020, Biden won Arizona by an average of 4 votes per precinct. 4. So I try to remember that the most difficult thing is waking up every morning and worrying about the country. And compared to that, yeah, let's make some phone calls. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Myra. And I'll just apologize in advance. We have the Blue Angels practicing right now. So if they're particularly loud zooming overhead, I might just pause for a moment because they might drown me out. So for the last 15 years, I've worked as a freelance medical writer, and I've done about 1,000 interviews with doctors and scientists. And I've thought a lot about the art of conversing with strangers. Before Trump was elected, I voted in every election and I phone banked every 4 years or so, but mostly I took democracy for granted. I assumed that other people would be knocking on doors and making calls. I'm not sure who exactly I thought these other people were, like elves or idealistic college students, but I figured that they would take care of it. But then when Trump was elected, I realized I needed to do more. I was too scared to canvass at first, so I got my start in phone banking. And eventually I mustered the courage to canvass in California's Central Valley, in Sedona, and in Richmond, Virginia. So when I'm phone banking, it can be easy to get discouraged when I'm getting lots of disconnected numbers and voicemails and the occasional person hanging up on me. But every hour, I might have 1 or 2 conversations that make it all worthwhile. In November 2020, the day before the election, I was calling Philadelphia and I spoke with this 19-year-old voter I'll call Karina. She was voting for the first time ever and she didn't know how the process worked. I looked up her polling place and she said it was a couple blocks from her house. I asked her when she could vote on election day and she said she'd try to go first thing in the morning. I also reminded her that she should bring her ID. When I asked her what her most important issues were as a voter, she said police reform and gun control. She even said she was interested in serving as a poll worker, so I texted her information from the county recorder's office. Even if it was too late to sign up for this year, she'd have it for next time. As we were wrapping up, I thanked her for talking with me and for being a voter. And she said, well, actually, I'm really glad you called. My parents are out of town right now, and I didn't know who else I could ask about voting since I've never done it before. So I'm glad I got to talk with you. It felt so great to provide something useful to a first-time voter in a swing state. As you know, Biden narrowly won Pennsylvania with a margin of about 2% of the votes cast in that state. I called Karina back on election day just to see if she had any questions and whether she had made it to the polls. And she told me, oh, I already voted this morning. There wasn't a line and it was pretty easy. I asked her how it felt to vote for the very first time. And she said, you know, I wanted to start crying because it felt so important. That conversation made it all worth it. So now we're going to give you a chance to introduce yourselves to one another in small groups. We're going to guess that some of you might be on the fence about phone banking or canvassing. I mean, you know how important it is, and you know how high the stakes are for this year's elections, and you want to make a difference, but maybe it's outside your comfort zone. We'd like you to take a moment just to consider what motivates you to do things that are outside your comfort zone. In a moment, we'll invite you to share your thoughts in small groups for about 8 minutes total. Please keep an eye on the time so everybody gets a chance to talk. If you happen to find yourself alone in your breakout room, just come back to this main room and we'll help you out. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Those were some, I really enjoyed the conversation that I had with some of my other fellow attendees here. And I'd just like to take a minute to invite you to share what you said or heard in your group about what motivates you to go outside your comfort zone. If you just want to drop any observations into the chat, I'd love to kind of be a little fly on the wall for like what other groups got to talk about.
What motivates you to do things outside your comfort zone?
Jackie, acquiring a skill. Dara, when something feels really important. Yes. Cheryl, I heard people saying they were doing this for their children and their grandchildren. Amy, knowing that many races are won by just a few votes. Myra, abject terror about the alternative. Vicky, right now it's desperation. Noelle, emergency crisis. Katie, thinking about the other outcome. Nancy, fear of what will happen if I don't. Britta, the sense of the threat of losing democracy. Linda, a sense of urgency. Diane, when I realize when we get the Democrats to vote, we win. Lots of people give up and stay home. We want to let them know that together we can make a difference. Yes. Sherry, living in Utah. Motivation. Dana, being able to do the activity with someone who is more experienced to take baby steps. Oh, that's such a great thing to have a buddy on that. LD2, Val, what motivated me was a desperate feeling about the political situation in this country and the need to do something and stop complaining. I am with you on that. And to save democracy. Allison, pushing myself to face my fears and be helpful. Paul, guilt for not doing something when you could. Denise, don't worry about having all the answers. Point to the website. Yes, also at least candidate's name, even if the person is unable to discuss. That's so right. The name recognition is huge. Catherine, want to grow as a person and to be a role model. Thank you, everybody. These are just great motivations. And, I think for me, particularly as an introvert, it's really important to kind of keep coming back to what keeps me going when things get hard, because this is hard work, canvassing and phone banking. It's not always rewarding. There's all kinds of challenges, but when I can kind of tune back into the things that at my core really feed my passion and help me keep going, that can sometimes just keep me inspired to keep on keeping on. So I really appreciate all of you sharing that with us today. So now I'm going to turn it back to Myra.
Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how to approach phone banking and canvassing. We introverts really want to feel prepared before jumping into something that is outside our comfort zone. So here's a little bit about what you need and what you don't need to be ready to phone bank or canvass. What you need primarily is patience and persistence. Even signing into a phone bank, you may need to remind yourself, it's going to take me some patience to get through all of this, the admin stuff that's at the beginning of a phone bank, renaming yourself and all that. Think of it like playing the outfield in baseball. You're not involved in every play, but sometimes what you do could make all the difference, and the team is counting on you. You also need an attitude of curiosity and friendliness toward those you're calling. And you need a few talking points about the candidate. What you don't need to make up what to say. Phone banks will have a script that will prompt you what to say next. You don't need to be an expert on the candidate or the issues. Remember, I said earlier, prepare but not too much. You don't need to know all the answers to the voters' questions. And you don't need to be a local or pretend to be a local. it's really common for voters to be called by volunteers from out of state or out of district, and voters rarely ask where you're calling from. But if they do ask, be honest. You can say you're calling because the campaign wants to reach every voter in the district, which is true. One other volunteer suggested saying, I'm calling to try to recruit more local volunteers. In summary, I'll give you a moment to look at this slide. In summary, you're a volunteer. It's okay to say, I don't know, when you're on the phone with a voter. It's okay to even say, I don't know, but I can try to find out and text you that information. What's the best way to reach you? So, one of the reasons not to phone bank that we hear a lot is so few people answer the phones. Isn't it a waste of time? So let's talk about that. Generally, about 10% of those we call will answer the phone. Talking with voters is how campaigns update their voter list, which enables the next round of contacts to be better targeted. And the voters who don't answer the phone this time are moved to the top of the queue to be called next time. As you may know, the primary goal of phone banks and canvasses is to identify those who we can count on to support our candidates, as well as potential supporters, and have conversations with them to get them more actively involved. But even the other calls are valuable to the campaigns. So, for example, when you reach a supporter, here's how it's a win. Every supporter we identify will get called again when it's time to get out the vote. When you reach someone who's undecided or says, I don't vote, it's an important opportunity to listen to them. And we'll talk more about some strategies for that. When you reach someone who says they'll never vote for a Democrat or is hostile, you'll mark them as such, and they'll be removed from the call list for the future. And if you reach a wrong number, that also helps the campaign to make the call list more accurate. No matter how any call goes, you're gathering useful information for the campaign. And now Elizabeth will give you some strategies for what to do when you reach someone who's ready to talk.
So my approach to phone banking is inspired by the Japanese tea ceremony. I was fortunate enough to attend one of these in Japan, and there was this beautiful scroll on the wall with elegant calligraphy. And the saying translated roughly as one time, one meeting. In other words, we may only meet once in his lifetime, so let's make the most of it. I try to be present and to slow down. I bring beginner's mind to every conversation. And most importantly, I strive to engage in conversations that are relational, not transactional. People sometimes worry about not knowing all the answers or not being an expert on the candidate's positions. My experience is that it is much more important to be a good listener than a great talker. There is such a deep hunger to be heard and listened to, especially these days. I'll give you an overview of my approach and then go into more detail in a moment. My best conversations with voters involve four main elements. So the first one is to ask what is most important to the voter. The second is to listen attentively, and sometimes I even jot down a few notes in my notebook about what they share with me. The third is to reflect back what they say. And the fourth is to offer information or resources that connects what's most important to them with something the candidate stands for. So to help me listen, ask, reflect back, and offer something to the voter, I often rely on three magic phrases that come in handy in almost any situation. The first magic phrase is, if you could change 2 or 3 things about the country, what would they be? If they can't think of anything, I might ask it a different way. Well, what keeps you up at night? Or even, well, if you were in an elevator with Joe Biden for 2 minutes, what would you tell him? This helps me find out what's most important to them. The second magic phrase is, wow, that sounds really hard. And then pause to see if they have more to say. Sometimes when people start to open up, they'll talk about things they're struggling with. And instead of just jumping to the candidate's talking points, you can show genuine empathy by just listening. This really helps to build rapport and helps to move the conversation from the head to the heart. The third magic phrase is, oh, interesting. Tell me more about that. Even if I disagree, I try to bring my non-judgmental curiosity to the conversation. Can I view the voter like an anthropologist would? The beauty of these phrases is that they're nonpartisan and they work in almost any situation with any voter. And after I say any of these phrases, I try to count silently in my head to 10. Many times people feel like they have to fill the space. And if you wait for them to say something, often they'll start talking. So my suggestion to you is to try practicing these phrases in your conversations with family, friends, coworkers, and just see what happens. If they're not your style, no problem, just adapt the language to your own voice. After I ask what's important to them and I listen to what they say, I try to reflect back what I heard, often starting with the phrase, "it sounds like." So it sounds like you're really worried about having enough food for your family. Or it sounds like if the minimum wage were higher, it would make a big difference. Or it sounds like you have some ideas about how the country could improve. Tell me more about that. If you've ever gone to couples counseling, you know that reflective listening doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with someone. It just shows that you're really hearing what they're saying. Being a good listener doesn't mean being totally silent. Conversations go a lot better when people know that they have an attentive listener. When you're canvassing, you can show your engagement through your facial expressions and your body language. With phone banking, you can convey this with verbal cues like, wow, seriously? In linguistics, this is called back channeling. The idea is that the speaker and the listener are co-creating a narrative. The speaker uses the front channel and the listener uses the back channel with these kinds of cues to indicate that they're engaged, interested, and they want to hear more. You can also convey warmth and empathy by smiling, exaggerating your facial expressions, nodding in agreement, and talking with your hands. It might seem corny since they can't see you when you're phone banking, and they can't really see your facial expressions behind that mask, but our body language and words are bundled together as a package. If you smile, they can hear it over the phone or even through that mask. If appropriate, share a laugh with a voter, make a joke or laugh at one of theirs. Sharing humor can very quickly create a sense of connection and bonding. Sometimes I tell people, I hope we can count on your vote for Democrats, not just for senator, but all the way down to state and local races too, and even the city dog catcher. These are all conversational levers and dials that you can play with. Just experiment and see if any of them work for you. Also, no matter how skillfully you navigate a conversation, sometimes people will hang up on you or they won't want to talk. It's okay. Someone once told me, if you're not hearing no at least half the time, maybe you're not asking the right questions. These are close races that are not slam dunks, where conversations like yours can make all the difference between winning and losing. Now, Myra has some more tips for how to successfully engage with voters.
Okay, let's take a step back and look at the whole picture that starts with hello. It might seem that a conversation with a voter could go in a million different directions from there, but let's think of it in terms of 5 paths. The sample script in your handout frames it up this way too. The first possibility, someone answers the phone but says, "I can't talk right now." Maybe before they hang up, you can offer to text them the candidate's website. It's worth a try. Second, maybe you reach someone who's with you all the way. From there, you can make sure they have a specific plan to vote and even ask whether they might help build support for the candidate by talking to their friends or having a house sign, something like that. Third, a Trump supporter. This is the one we volunteers tend to fear the most, but often it's not that difficult. We're not trying to argue with them or change their minds. Our efforts are much better spent moving on to talk with someone else. The fourth path, you'll notice that our sample script doesn't start immediately with, "Can we count on your vote?" Instead, we suggest trying to get the voter to talk about what they care about, and then you can find points of connection between what they say and the candidate's views. For example, you can say, "Mark Kelly has asked us to call voters and find out what's most important to you. If you were in charge, what 1 or 2 things would you change in the country?" And then you can use some of Elizabeth's magic phrases to keep the conversation going. When in doubt, tell me more about that, is very useful. And the last path is if they say, I'm not interested in politics, I don't vote. You can approach this one very much like the previous one, but you may have to make a conscious effort not to give up on them. Slow down, get curious, listen, and reflect back what you hear. Okay, now I'm going to go rogue for a moment. As I mentioned earlier, when you're at a phone bank, you'll have a script that's specific to the campaign on that day. What I didn't say is that some of these scripts are terrible. You'll know that you have a terrible script when you come to the part about what to say to an undecided voter, and the script says, just mark them as undecided and hang up. They do. Or tell them why it's so important to vote. If you could see Elizabeth right now, you'd see steam coming out of her ears. She co-leads a whole training about how to make I don't vote the beginning, not the end of the conversation. And you'll hear more about that today. So the practice script in your handout that we've been dropping in the chat and talking about all along is one that we wrote based on what we've learned about how to have good conversations with voters. Here are some of the tips. The first 15 seconds of the call is especially important, both for you and the person you're talking with. You need to be sure not to panic and forget your own name. And the first 15 seconds is also when the person you're calling decides whether to hang up or not. So I usually start like this, something like this. Hi, is Jennifer available? My name is Myra and I'm a volunteer. I'm not calling to ask for money or sell you anything. I'm calling for Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, who's running for re-election. Start with some energy and say the candidate's name as many times as possible, as someone mentioned in the chat earlier. The way we phrase questions in this sample script is deliberate, and it's designed to keep the conversation going. For example, instead of saying, how are you doing today? Or is this a good time to talk? Instead try, I just have a couple quick questions. It'll only take a minute. And then keep talking. And although the phone bank script in the phone bank might say, what's the most important issue for you? Instead, try this. If you were in charge, what are the first 2 or 3 things you'd want to change about the country? Or what keeps you up at night? This approach comes from union organizing techniques, and it's all about seeing the voter not just as someone who cares about abstract issues, but instead as someone who's an active participant in public life. Empowerment. Instead of asking, are you planning to vote? Try, can we count on you to be a voter for Mark Kelly for US Senate? See, we got his name in again. Depending on their response, you'll know which way to take the conversation. It's important to keep the intent of the phone bank script, but you can make it sound like you, and you can make it more conducive to having real conversations. So now we're going to demonstrate a few calls for you based on the same script that's in the handout you have. So here we go. Ring, 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 ring.
Hello?
Hi, may I please speak with Elizabeth Chur?
That's me. What's this about?
Hi, my name is Myra, and I'm a volunteer with Mark Kelly, the Democratic candidate for Senate. I'm not calling to ask for money. This is just a 1-minute check-in call about the election.
Oh, sorry. I'm driving to work right now. I can't talk.
Oh, sorry about that. No problem. Would it be okay for me to text you Mark Kelly's website? Then you can take a look when you're not busy.
Sure.
And is this the best number for you?
Yeah, this is my cell.
Great, great. I'll text it right now. Thank you and drive safely.
Thank you.
Okay, so if a call goes this way, notice that you've already confirmed for the campaign that this is a valid phone number and someone who's at least a potential supporter. You'll mark this and the phone bank as not home, and that person will go back in the queue for someone else to call another time. It's a win. And FYI, this is the same as the way you'd mark it and what would happen if nobody answered or if the person was literally not home. Okay, now Elizabeth will call me.
Ring, ring.
Hello,
Hi, may I speak with Myra Levy, please?
that's me.
Oh, hi, my name is Elizabeth Chur, and I'm a volunteer with Mark Kelly, the Democratic candidate for Senate. I'm not calling to ask for money. This is just a 1-minute check-in call about the election.
Oh, I know all about Mark Kelly. He's my
Oh.
cousin's ex-wife's neighbor. And we always vote for all the Democrats.
Oh, wow, fantastic. I'm so glad you're a voter and that you're supporting Mark Kelly and all the Democrats. We're expecting a very, very close election in November. And so we're asking all our supporters to do 3 things. First of all, how do you plan to vote? By mail or in person?
Oh, I'll go to the polls on election day. I really like doing that.
Okay, great. And what time will you vote on election day?
Probably on my way to work. I'll just go first thing in the morning.
Great. And do you know where your polling place is?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, it's at the Redemption Church Arcadia at 3330 East Camelback Road near North 34th Street.
Right, same as always.
Okay, fantastic. Well, the second thing is, could you tell 3 people you know to vote for Mark Kelly, like friends, relatives, coworkers?
Sure, I can do that.
Great, wonderful. And just the last thing, could you help out with the campaign? Even a little bit makes a big difference.
I don't know. I'm pretty busy.
Okay, well, I don't know. Do you want to just maybe think about it and maybe we could loop back to you in a week or so?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being a voter and for your support of Mark Kelly, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you. All right, so this type of call helps to make sure that our strongest supporters have all the information they need to vote. And it also enlists their help to spread the word. It's a win. You'll get details about that day's ask, like making a plan to vote or confirming their polling location or whatever it is at that day's phone bank or canvassing orientation. So next, I'm going to call one of our teaching assistants, Jackie Tulsky, who is playing the role of the voter in this next scenario. Ready, Jackie?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ring, ring.
Hello?
Hi, may I speak with Jackie Tulsky, please?
Yes, this is she.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Chur, and I'm a volunteer with Mark Kelly, the Democratic candidate for Senate. I'm not calling to ask for money. This is just a 1-minute check-in call about the...
Honey. It's fine. We're all Trump supporters here.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, thanks so much for letting me know, and have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Yeah. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Okay, this scenario is actually based on real conversations. Both Myra and I have talked with committed Republicans who were very cordial when politely letting us know that they would never, ever vote for a Democrat. So even if you happen to reach a Republican, even a Trump supporter, it's quite possible that your conversation with them could be brief but pleasant. And remember, finding out that a voter strongly opposes your candidate is valuable information for the campaign. It's another win. You'll mark this voter strong oppose, and the campaign will remove them from the list of people to call in the future. So volunteers can spend their time reaching out to strong or likely supporters. And now I'll call another voter, also played by Jackie, in this final demo scenario. Ring, ring.
Hello?
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Chur. May I speak with Jackie Tulsky, please?
Yeah, that's me. What's this about?
Oh, I appreciate you taking my call. I'm a volunteer with Mark Kelly, the Democratic candidate for Senate. I'm not calling to ask for money. This is just a 1-minute check-in call about the upcoming election. We're just trying to find out what you think about...
I'm sorry. I'm really busy right now.
You've got a lot going on right now. This will just take a minute. Mark Kelly's asked us to call voters to ask what's most important to you. If you could change 2 or 3 things about the country, what would they be?
You know what? I don't vote.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
It's just a waste of time. All those campaign promises and then nothing changes. I am so tired of it. I mean, I've got enough to do without that. I mean, I voted before, but my life sure didn't get any better.
You wonder if one vote makes a difference?
Yeah, I mean, nothing happened. I mean, look at things now. I take care of my granddaughter, and her asthma gets worse every year with all those wildfires, and prices just keep going up so much lately. And, my daughter and son-in-law, they work full time, but they can barely make ends meet.
Wow, that sounds really hard.
It is. It really is.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I mean, my daughter just got a second job at Home Depot down in Phoenix. And do you know it costs her more than $50 just to fill up her car?
Wow.
It takes a couple of hours of work just to even break even on the gas money.
Uh-huh.
I mean, people shouldn't have to work that hard just to put food on the table.
Yeah, that sounds really tough. I'm wondering, Jackie, if you were in charge, what would you change to make things better?
Oh, I have no idea.
Hmm.
I really don't know.
Well, I don't know, if you were in an elevator with Mark Kelly, what 2 or 3 things would you tell him to put at the top of his to-do list?
2 or 3 things. Well, I'd raise the minimum wage.
Mm.
I mean, maybe my daughter could just work one job.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I'd like to tell him to do something about gas prices.
Yeah, well, based on what you said, I think Senator Mark Kelly might be a good match for you. I'm wondering if I could share a bit more about him.
Yeah, I mean, I really need to go in a minute, but
Mm.
I have to pick up my granddaughter. But
Oh,
okay.
All right. Well, I will make this quick. Mark Kelly supports raising the minimum wage, and he's also working to pause the federal gas tax to give working families some relief. I'm wondering, what do you think about that?
Well, that sounds like it could be good.
I know you need to go soon, but I'm just wondering if you could see yourself voting in the upcoming election so your voice would be heard about increasing the minimum wage and doing something about those gas prices.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, if I did vote, I'd really want more information about these candidates.
You want to make good choices when you vote. Could I text you Senator Mark Kelly's website, which has more information?
Yeah, okay, sure. Go ahead and do that.
Great. Okay. And is this the best number to text?
It's my cell phone.
Great. I'll do that right now. Jackie, thank you so much for talking with me and sharing more about what's most important to you. I really appreciate it. And I hope Mark Kelly can earn your vote.
Well, it was really nice talking to you too. I really do have to go, but bye now.
Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye. Great. Okay, so this was an example of what's known as a high potential voter, someone sometimes called a low propensity voter. In other words, someone who rarely or never votes. You're likely to run across at least one of these folks during a typical phone bank or canvas shift. And in fact, in 2020, even with record-breaking turnout, 34% of eligible voters did not vote. Instead of just marking them as not voting and hanging up, we have a real opportunity to engage with them to help them think about how the election relates to real-world issues that affect their lives. And in fact, I co-teach an entire workshop on this topic in partnership with Dr. Jackie Tulsky, who played the voter in the last 2 role plays. That training is called You and the 34%, How to Have Meaningful Conversations with High Potential Voters. And by the way, our last 2 workshops will be this Saturday, October 8th, and Monday, October 10th. We'd love to see you and your friends at one of these upcoming trainings, and we will share sign-up links at the end of today's workshop. All right, so now we want to give you a chance to practice some of these conversations in small groups, just like the conversations you saw. We know that for introverts, now might be the moment where you develop a sudden passion for taking out the trash or scrubbing your kitchen floor, anything to possibly avoid an awkward conversation, even a pretend one. Try to resist the siren song of your house chores. And survey feedback from past trainings, participants consistently tell us that this practice session was the most useful and interesting part of today's training. So we encourage you to just give it a try. Remember, you'll be practicing with other slightly nervous introverts, so it's a safe place to learn. I'd also like to encourage you to remember what you shared during our first small group discussion. What motivates you to go outside your comfort zone? I encourage you to slow down, lean into any resistance, and connect with that deep motivation that's helped you tackle other challenging things. Remember, as introverts, one of our superpowers is being very internally motivated. Please take a look at your handout, which we sent you by email prior to this training. If you still need a copy, we will drop the file into the chat one more time. If you're on an iPad or a phone, you might have an easier time opening a link to the document, which we are also dropping into the chat. These are all different ways to access the same content. So today we have some fabulous volunteers helping out. Cheryl, Vicky, Jackie, Martha, Dara, and Charlie. You want to raise your hands? So one of us may stop by your room and pause the conversation to answer questions or make a few suggestions. If you're having technical difficulties or are the only person in your room, just come back to this main room and we'll help you out. Please take the first couple minutes to read the instructions at the top of page 1 out loud before you start practicing, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And we will see you in 20 minutes.
Welcome back, everybody, and hooray to all of you who jumped in and gave this a try. We're going to take just a couple minutes now to debrief the practice session, and pretty soon is going to be the Q&A. So, when you were in the voter role, what did the volunteers say or do to make you feel like they cared about what you thought? Please go ahead and put your responses in the chat, and we'll read them out and talk about them. Voter, what did the volunteers say to make you feel like they cared about what you thought? Tell me more. That's a good one. Tell me more. It's the best one, really? Elizabeth, they've got it. Sounds like is good. They listened and reflected back my concerns, says Roger. Noelle says they were willing to let me text them. Yep. And Katie says, oh, wow, that sounds really hard. Catherine says, spoke with respect and concern. Denise says the volunteer listened while I was being frustrated. Yeah, that's important. Brenda asked me to share. Genuine concern, very kind. Great, great, great. Okay, so the next question is, as the volunteer, how did this experience compare with what you expected or feared in making these pretend calls? How did the experience as the caller compare to what you thought? Not as bad. Yay, Roger. Even when they were frustrated, they weren't mean. That's often true. Nancy says my partner was great. Judy says it was more interactive. Anne loved the brevity of the script. Good, good. Katie, less awkward than I thought. Yes, this is what we were hoping. This is making Elizabeth and me very happy. No steam coming out the ears. Denise says the tips in the handout, listening, asking, etc., made this better. Brenda says open, willing to take a minute. That the Republican that Cheryl talked to wasn't hostile. That's nice. Great. And the script, Linda said the script was very helpful. Wow. Excellent. Okay, so now if you had a third person who was an observer in your room, or if you were the observer, what surprised you about watching this whole interaction unfold? What surprised you as the observer? Or as any role? As we're waiting to see if people had any surprises, I will just say a couple things. Okay. Oh, there they go. Then I'll say them afterwards. Linda says nobody hung up the phone. Jackie says people were willing to try. Dara says how smoothly people made the script their own. Great. Sarah said open to getting text messages. Diane says the volunteer made a great connection with the voter, reflected and understood. Anne says, I was impressed. If there was anxiety, they did not show it. Interesting. Catherine, willingness to dive in spite of anxiety and feeling unprepared. That is phone banking for you. And Noelle, how natural both the volunteer and the voter were, both very calm, slow talkers. I felt like they modeled what I needed because I just want the call to end too when I'm calling people. Yes, I'm with you on that. And Martha and Charlie said this too. These people are excellent phone bankers, meaning you all. And Dara says too. So I just want to mention one thing before I turn it back over to Elizabeth, which is keep this handout. You can use it in your phone banks and make sure if you haven't gotten a chance to look at the last page, it's a few kind of handy phrases that are from Elizabeth and Jackie's other training, you in the 34%. So take this as a resource and run with it. Elizabeth. Go ahead.
Thanks, Myra. So in a minute, we'll start wrapping up the formal part of the training, including one more story I want to share with you. But first, we have 3 things we want to ask you. First, we would love your feedback about today's training. This is a work in progress. We are dropping a link for a 2-minute survey into the chat. We'll also send you a follow-up email with that survey link, plus the slides and some other information. Second, we have 33 days to Election Day. And remember, with mail-in ballots, every day between now and November 8th is Election Day. So it is get out the vote time. Would everyone who is willing to sign up to Phonebank or Canvas in the next week, please raise your hand? Oh, great. Oh my gosh, this makes me so happy. I'm seeing a lot of hands. All right, thank you. You can put your hands down. And, you know, phone banking also and canvassing is more fun with friends. I'm wondering if you could please raise your hand if you're willing to ask 3 people if they would sign up to join you in talking with voters within the next week. They don't have to say yes. All you have to do is ask. You're willing to just put it out there? Okay, I'm seeing lots of hands. That's great. Remember, if you're not hearing no at least half the time, maybe you're not asking the right question. So thank you for going out on the limb and being willing to ask the people that you know to join you. So if you are not already connected to a phone bank or Canvas in your area, we recommend the Bay Area Coalition phone banks on Saturdays, Sundays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. As Myra mentioned, feel free to use our sample script as the starting point for your conversation with voters. And also at these phone banks, we've got some fantastic, very welcoming, experienced coaches, which will who will help you from start to finish of the phone bank. So these are great phone banks to join. If you're interested in canvassing and you're in the California area, the Bay Area Coalition is leading groups to knock on doors in the Central Valley every Saturday. If your friends are feeling shy or are they on the fence, share our frequently asked questions with them, which we're posting into the chat right now, and we will also send you a link in our follow-up email. Finally, we invite you to give phone banking or canvassing a try, and then to build your skills by coming to one of our last 2 You and the 34% workshops that I mentioned earlier for successfully engaging with high potential voters. We are dropping sign-up links in the chat. We'd love to see you and your friends, and we have even more handy phrases and strategies for navigating conversations with voters. We're truly grateful for everyone who made today's training possible, including Susan Bole and Berta Siegel-McDonald with Democracy Action Marin. Thank you, both of you. And also to everybody on our all-volunteer team who helped up behind the scenes, including Martha Knudsen as our Zoom host, Sally Faison as our slide monitor, Cheryl Phippen, Martha Knudsen, Jackie Tulsky, Charlie Barron, and Dara Friedman-Wheeler as our teaching assistants, and many others for promoting today's workshop. So to close us out, I'd just like to share one more story with you. In 2018, I was canvassing in the Central Valley on a Saturday as dusk was falling. I was about to call it a day, but then I saw a man I'll call Rajat playing catch with his 3 kids on the street. He wasn't even on my list of voters, but I introduced myself and I said I was a volunteer with the Democratic Party. Rajat told me, you know, I became a citizen 12 years ago, but I've actually never voted and I don't know exactly how it works, but I'm thinking about voting for the first time this year. I said, yeah, this would be a great year to start voting. It is such an important election. I'm wondering if you've gotten your ballot in the mail yet. He said he had, so I said to him, well, why don't you go get it and I'll walk you through the process. Rajat went inside, he came back out with his ballot and he turned on the garage light so we could see. He spread out his ballot on the trunk of his car and his 3 kids who looked like they were between the ages of 8 and 15, they all gathered around with their eyes really big. On a piece of scratch paper, I showed Rajat how to fill in the arrow for the candidate of his choice and said that all he had to do for each of the races was that. And then I explained how to put his marked ballot pages into the envelope, to sign and date it carefully and return it as soon as possible. He nodded and he looked a little surprised that it was so easy. I asked him, so when do you think you could return your ballot? He said, probably sometime in the coming week. And I said, great, just make sure you don't forget to do it. This election could depend on just a handful of votes and yours could decide the results. He said, oh no, I won't forget. In addition to the satisfaction of helping Rajat get a step closer to voting for the first time, it was also amazing to watch his 3 kids taking this all in. They didn't say anything, but I could tell they were paying attention to my conversation with their dad. I thanked all of them for their time. And as I was leaving, I said to his kids, I hope all of you will also register to vote in a few years when you're old enough. They smiled shyly and we all said goodbye. My friends, this is democracy at its finest. It's these one-to-one conversations with ordinary people in person and over the phone, which will decide what kind of future we will have as a country. This is how things are going to change for the better. One voter at a time, one conversation at a time. Voters like Rashad in the Central Valley and Karina in Philadelphia, and all the other voters who just need someone to call them to get that crucial piece of information or to answer that question that they may not know anybody else to ask. These kinds of conversations that you and I will have between now and November 8th could make the difference between winning and losing the midterms. Right now, we have an incredible chance to boost our turnout levels. Until now, we have left a lot of votes on the table. But just think what we could accomplish if we had full participation in our democracy. So we are going to close the formal part of the training right now, but I want to thank all of you for being so generous with your time and attention today. And for those of you who have time to stick around, we'll open it up for a few minutes for question and answers about phone banking or canvassing.